In this video I will go through the festival crowd spawner sample of the GPU ECS Animation Baker. As you can see, this scene features 40,000 different characters all animating together. So there is a rectangle box of characters which each have 200 rows and 200 columns, and they all have like a 1.5 spacing in between them. And there is 5 different prefabs, each having 3 or 4 different animations played on them. So how does this all work? So we have this crowd spawner which defines the columns and the rows, the spacing, and all the different animators that were generated before. These are all GPU ECS animators. For example, this zombie here, that comes from this animator, and it has all these different dances on it. So how does this now work behind the scenes? For that we have to look to the code, and we see here there's 3 relevant code files. We have the behavior for the spawner with the baker for the entity, and the components of that spawner, and then the system that will actually do the spawning. So the behavior essentially just adds the relevant components. There's one regular component and one dynamic buffer. So the regular component defines the columns, the rows, the spacing, and the dynamic buffer has the 5 different prefabs that it assigns to the entity. And of course the behavior does nothing more than attach these components and dynamic buffers. Now if we look at the system, it's a nice system. Everything is burst compiled, and in the on update function we're kicking off a iJob entity job. And if you look at the execute function of the job, it will take in that crowd spawner component and that dynamic buffer that we created. So just to be clear, in the scene, even though this is set up as a job to run over multiple spawners, there is only one spawner in the scene, so this will run only once. There is an entity command buffer system set up with a parallel writer, and we also have 2 lookups that we will use. We'll see that later where they are used actually. So first we have a random number generator. We calculate the base offset so that the square of the entities is centered around the origin. And then we iterate over all the columns and rows. So this will result in a 40,000 times this code to be executed. First we select the random prefab from the crowd spawner animator prefabs dynamic buffer. And then we spawn this prefab. We set it at the right position. That we do by adding this columns times spacing, row times spacing as X and Z, plus a random offset so that they don't appear like they're in a military parade, but they have some randomization there. And they're also slightly rotated, and we also get the scale from the original prefab, just to make sure that all prefabs are displayed as they are scaled in the prefab itself. This is necessary because the zombie was actually a little bit larger, so it's been scaled to 0.7 compared to the others. So then we also, and this is important, we pick a random animation ID from the available animation. So how do we know the available animations? We get that from the dynamic buffer of GPU ECS Animation Data Buffer elements on the prefab. And then we can just take the random animation ID between 0 and the length of this buffer, and then we can kick off this animation. And the important thing to note here also is that the normalized time is randomized, just to avoid synchronized animations. And that will then result in this being ran only once, because at the end we destroy the spawner once it has run once and all the prefabs have been generated. So you'll see here now that all the entities here are just instances of one of those 5 prefabs. This is one that I clicked on. That's it for the festival sample scene.